Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk or continue our talks or discussion of Очеретино-Новобахмутовка Soloviove foothold. As you can see, we have adjusted the map, we increased the gray zone, we reduced the area of Ukraine control, and of course we increased the territory of Russian control. The most important is that we continue receiving significant number of videos from Очеретино itself. It's probably third or fourth video in a row we received from the town where the Russians established another flag in the central part, yet we haven't received any videos from the northern or from the western or from the eastern part of the stronghold. We just received significant number of videos from the central part, from the area of the railway station. So of course it doesn't mean anything, but of course from the other side that can mean that it's still not secure, let's say, to stay in the western part, in the northern or in the eastern. The Ukrainian sources are saying that they abandoned their positions in Очеретино completely. Probably there are some kind of let's say rearguard forces were left in the area just to, let's say, alarm and to warn the Ukrainians if the Russians continue moving further. But also we have very interesting update on the western part, on the western, let's say, direction of Очеретино. We have very interesting adjustment of map of the deep state. If you remember, yesterday we were talking that the Russians conducted a very powerful offensive operation along the railways in direction of Progress. So that was an attack. And according to yesterday's statement of, let's say, Ukrainian sources, the 100th Mechanized Brigade managed to repel Russian attack and the Russians were forced to fall back. But anyway, most likely the Russians, of course, fell back, but they didn't return back, let's say, inside of Очеретино, and most likely the Russians managed to dig in deeper, let's say, between two rivers. As if you remember the previous videos, there are a lot of water barriers, and currently the Russians are trying to dig in deeper on this, let's say, line. So just to secure the flank and not to allow the Ukrainians to counterattack the Russians in the western flank while they continue clearing Очеретино itself, and while the Russians are preparing the further plans to attack Arkhangelsk. So very interesting update, very interesting attack probably the Russians conducted yesterday. Today I believe we're going to receive more updates. Now we see that the Russians are between two, let's say, water barriers, and likely the Ukrainians are able to force the Russians to fall back. Another important thing that I would like to discuss with you about Очеретино and the troopers that currently storm Очеретино, it's very important. If we increase the numbers of update and if we zoom in the video better and closer, and for previous few days you're gonna see, not here, yes, it's not here, it was in Novobahmutovka. Now let's move to Novobahmutovka, where we also got to receive significant number of geolocations in video. And on this video, according to the Russians, they're establishing the flag in the central part of the village, which confirms the Russian control. This video wasn't geolocated, so we can't tell for sure where exactly which building was flagged by the Russians, but according to sources, once again, this let's say raising the flag event took place inside of the village. An important thing that if you have a very good quality, if you can zoom in, you're gonna see the 5 Russian soldiers and 3 soldiers on the right side. This one with the black flag has Wagners icons on their let's say armor. So most likely the Russians were using Ahmad special forces and former Wagner troopers for that offensive operation in direction of Novobahmutovka and in direction of Очеретино. And this is the reason, this is it. You can take a look at this video. You see the soldier, this one in the central, and he has Wagner icon, let's say, in front on his armor. And the same situation with the guy who, let's say, stands on the right corner of the screen. This is another Wagner icon. So once again, most likely the Очеретино, Novobahmutovka, and this line, this entire defense belt of armored forces of Ukraine was transferred to former Wagner forces for penetration and complete defeat of Ukrainians. And we see that they're professionals, they're doing their job as nobody did this job before since the end of the battle for Bakhmut. Yes, it's Wagners, it's former Wagners more precisely. Furthermore, the former Wagner forces continue moving further to the west, and according to information we have, the Russians, the former Wagner forces, including Ahmad special forces, entered the village by the name of Soloviove and have already established control over Tereshkova Street and Сорокалетия Победы streets, and most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this area as well. Most of the mappers have also updated their map showing additional Russian progress, so I have no doubts that today the Ukrainians will abandon Soloviove as well, and this is going to be, let's say, probably most likely the final phase of the creation of the southern, let's say, Cheretino foothold. Most likely the Russians are not going to move further to the west, only if the Ukrainians don't have any forces further to the west, and the Russians will have no problems to move, because now the Russians need to complete and to finish the clearing operation of the Berdychi, and 3 lines, forest lines and fields to the west of Durna River. But according to information we have from the Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians are saying that the village by the name of Berdychi and Semyonovka are completely under Russian control. This is the final, let's say, paragraph. A few observations: Berdychi and Semyonovka are completely under Russian control. Novokalinova and Keramika are in a difficult situation, and a retreat to the conditional lines Sokol, Novopokrovsk-Umanska is likely. So once again, the Ukrainians, very reliable Ukrainian, let's say, Asin sources are saying that Novokalinova, Keramik are very heavy clashes in the area. The Ukrainians left Berdychi already, and that situation looks like complete disaster for the armored forces of Ukraine. Everybody is blaming 115th Mechanized Brigade, but it's probably only history, and only in few years, intensive years, we're going to receive the real truth of the situation, of the battles and the events that took place on this direction. Now let's move to the south in direction of Krasnogorovka. As you can see, we also have lots of different updates. Most of the mappers have already updated their maps. Pro-Russian sources are saying that the southern and most central part are already under Russian control. The neutral mappers are saying the same, that the southern and the central southern part and Russian complete control. Only Deep State shows that just the most eastern, southeastern outskirts of the stronghold are under Russian control, and let's say the main, let's say, buildings and residential areas in the central part, in the western part, still remains under the Ukrainians. So we see some changes, some differences between mappers, so that's why we are not, of course, coloring the area, because we need more evidence. The only thing we have is how the Russians were bombing this territory heavily with artillery, most likely some kind of artillery preparation before further Russian attack. So, and we'll see, obviously today we're going to receive more updates from the territory. Novomikhailivka, we haven't received anything, just the first videos of how the Ukrainians start bombing and attacking the Russian forces inside of the village. Very interesting updates are coming from Kherson direction. You know that it's very weird and it's very interesting, because we have 2 icons, as you can see. The Syriac has already reported that Ukrainians either managed to restore their lost positions during the previous Russian counterattacks, or maybe they managed to, let's say, to save their foothold in the past, and now the Ukrainians started the second episode of the battle for Krynky. So it's not even second episode, probably it's season 2, and Ukrainians continue offensive and continue developing their foothold in the village by the name of Krynky. So the Ukrainians start sending additional troopers, and the thing is that the weather is very good right now. There are lots of grass, lots of green leaves on the trees, so it's very easy to hide Ukrainians between the between forest, between trees, among the high grass and so on. So it's now perfect, let's say, time for the Ukrainians to start offensive. Furthermore, the river is not so cold anymore, so it's not so big problem if the, let's say, boat destroyed and you can continue swimming and something like this. Probably the Ukrainians managed to get additional experience during the let's say previous season of Krynky operation, and now the Ukrainians started everything from the beginning. The only thing we have from the Russian side is the video of how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions on the Russian side of the river. So most likely we will adjust the color of this area, at least in the gray zone, until we receive additional and more reliable, let's say, confirmations of Ukrainian control over the territory. Anyway, this sounds and looks like not very good. Now we are moving further to Kharkiv area, and where we also got a lot of updates, and the most important is that the Russians during the previous 24 hours reported, Russian sources, that 2 more bridges, 2 more pontoon bridges, or some, let's say, constructions that Ukrainians were using for supply support were destroyed along Oskol River, and the Russians continue doing this today on the 25th of April as well. When talking about the borderlands, we have lots of videos that the Russians start hunting the engineering equipment, engineering engineering machine that Ukrainians were using to build trenches. So now the Russians try to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities, to reduce the number of trenches, to reduce the number of engineering machines, of course with FPV drones, maybe with Lancet, because the Ukrainians start building fortifications massively, and now the Russians try to avoid, to reduce these, let's say, possibilities for armed forces of Ukraine, because most likely they're going to start offensive. And we have another report that Ukrainian mass media write that armed forces of the Russian Federation are transferring forces to the border with Kharkiv and Sumy regions. So most likely, maybe probably after the Victory Day and after the May holidays, the Russians will start their greatest offensive operation with the purpose to establish, let's say, buffer zone to force the Ukrainians to fall back as far as possible. So this is the situation. I believe today we're going to receive lots of very interesting updates. Another important thing is that Poland promised, is ready to help Ukraine to return men of military age. So this is another disaster. Basically, the Ukrainians who left Ukraine, who tried to save the life, who doesn't care about the war, who doesn't support Zelensky, who doesn't support war, they left Ukraine to save their lives, to save their families, and now Poland took them as hostages and promised Ukraine that they can return them back. And there are lots of Ukrainians in Poland, obviously, but today we start receiving also a lot of videos from the Ukrainian side, from Ukrainian people who was trapped in this situation, and basically the Ukrainians currently are doing everything they can but to change the citizenship, to change the citizenship from Ukrainian to any other citizenship. And this is also a very big disaster for, of course, Ukraine. And the most important update, that's this night Antony Blinken arrived in China trying to blackmail Xi Jinping with, let's say, support and supply of Russia to stop this process, but he, of course, he was humiliated. I believe you saw the video how Blinken arrived in Shanghai, and he was met by probably third sort, let's say, locals, authorities, and so on. And this is not, of course, the best beginning of the negotiation process. And so we'll see. Currently, we don't know for sure what is going to be next. But another important report that Xi Jinping is planning to soon to go to Europe, and he's going to visit as well Serbia, and he's going to visit and have a meeting with the president of Serbia, Vučić, on the date when the United States of America and its countries destroyed the China embassy on the territory of this country. So a lot of very interesting thing probably waits us on the 25th of April. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.